Hey there. Here's another game with the bishops of opposite color, and another game that I show that was played by Mikhail Botvinnik, whom I'm quite a big fan of. So here Botvinnik was playing with the black pieces, and he has a bit of an advantage. He just played bishop e4, and his bishop here is much better. The bishop on e4 is much better than this white bishop on b4, which might be not entirely obvious, but the way you can tell these kind of things is that this bishop has a wide open diagonal for it to attack, and this bishop doesn't really have a future. Even if it manages to come to say d4, then it will be just kind of biting on this pawn chain that there's really no hope of undermining ever. So black's better because of this, but there's some other things going on in this position. There's a lot of heavy pieces on the board. There's an open C file, which white temporarily controls. So there's a lot of play going on. But Botvinnik builds up pressure against G2 just to tie up the white pieces to that. With this move, I think he prevents at G4, and now he kind of starts to chase down the bishop again. Black keeps the pawns on a dark square so that the bishop is even more constrained. And the game is really remarkable, mostly because of the endgame that we'll see a bit later. So black starts to break through on the queen side. If he can get the file open, that would be great. But for now, he just has a2 as another weakness, kind of as a target. So he combines pressure on g2 with the play on the queen side. There's no other way to break in these kind of positions. And so he won the pawn. But white's bishop now became alive. So Botvinnik went for all this, anticipating the following exchange combination. The pawn endgame is really lost for white, so he can't really take on g2, because then black will take here and this pawn with queen. So he goes away with the bishop. And we get this endgame with the bishops of opposite color, where black has an extra pawn, and it's a passed pawn. But that's only one sort of advantage to his position. He doesn't really have any other passed pawn on the king side or in the center. So white will probably just blockade this pawn and get a draw this way. But of course, I mean, Botvinnik was playing really hard to get even to this position with an extra pawn, so he doesn't want to give up. He tries to find some winning chances in this position, and there are some. So it seems like that the situation on the king side is completely blockaded. White set up kind of a fortress there. But black just kind of keeps poking at this, right? So now h4 is a target. The bishop has to watch this. The white king has to watch the b pawn. But it seems like, that the responsibilities are well established and well distributed, and white can accomplish his goals of defending h4 and stopping b4 pawn. So how can black possibly get things going here? Well, he has to look for sort of the third weakness, the third target for him, and that's this pawn chain in a way, right? He, at some point he may poke at that. What else can he do? Well, he still has these two pawns. I mean, like this, and they're kind of useless, being two of them there, because none of them are passed pawns. So that gives some ideas too. For now, Botvinnik just improves the position of his pieces and keeps waiting. Of course, white can't take on b4 because then h4 would fall on this pawn with queen. So white is kind of tied up to all this. Now Botvinnik decides to change his setup, and he transfers the bishop to e6. Why that's important, we'll see. Well, it turns out that the bishop is here so that it can indirectly guard the pawn on b3. So with the pawn advanced to b3, it has to be watched even more careful. And here Kotov kind of misjudged the position. He had to go for this endgame where he takes, and this sequence happens, and he's kind of able to block this. Well, actually, this position is no good, but yeah, black's winning here because the pawn would eventually promote. But what he should have done here was play king here and win this pawn in a different situation, and then this position would be a draw. So it's not very easy to figure out what to do, and Kotov went wrong here with bishop to c5, and he walked into really a trap that Botvinnik had set up. So Botvinnik initiated play on the queen side with the b pawn and the d pawn, like threatening to play d4 at some time. And he kind of left the king side alone, but now he creates play on the king side as well with this wonderful breakthrough. And what this does is that it does two things. If white takes like this, then the h pawn just runs, and that's hopeless because the bishop has no way of ever coming back and stopping the h pawn. So that's lost for sure. So he has to take with the f pawn. But now it turns out that the bishop can't go back to e7 anymore and guard h4. So then Botvinnik does another tricky thing. He protects the b pawn with the second sacrifice, and now the bishop is really well placed on e6. White takes, and now the king goes for the h pawn. It's very instructive. All black wanted here was to get two passed pawns that the white bishop can't stop from the same diagonal. That's why he had to black did all those sacrifices. And now he's got two pawns which are really far apart, and white can't really do anything against them. For example, if now white goes d5, then black will just take, and these pawns would run forward. So in the game he played king to f3, and the bishop came to d5, and white resigned. Like, these two pawns are really deadly. If the white king will basically have to guard this pawn, and in the meantime, the black king will run to the queen side. The queen side, win the bishop for the b pawn, and then win because he would still have a bishop and an extra pawn still left. The bishop is really well placed here. It stops this pawn and is going to defend the h pawn as well. So Botvinnik's idea here is that it comes from different complicated variations, but the idea is very simple: is that he knew the position that he was aiming for, a position with two passed pawns on different sides of the board, and that's all he kind of cared about. And this also shows that these endgames, they're pretty tricky, and they're not as automatically drawn as some would imagine. I took this example from a series of sort of bishop endgames, which I made an ebook about. You can check it out. It has similar positions with examples you can study and some practical positions you can solve. Some of them are very simple. Some of them are very fairly complicated. Maybe not as complicated as the Botvinnik example, but still fairly tricky. You can look at the position, figure out what you want to do, then you go to the next page on your Kindle, tablet, or something, and you see the solution. Then you move on to the next example. This one is a little similar to the Botvinnik game. Here again, it's about having two pawns, the f pawn and the a pawn, and in this case, it's important to have them advanced as far as possible. So, for example, here white plays a5. Anyway, just if you're curious in this type of endgame, you can check out this ebook. I'll add the link to it. Thanks.